What is happening, guys? Welcome back to the channel, and welcome back to, yet again, another video with your boy, Thick F87. So, as you can imagine, I have received many DMs in my life, but I have received a lot of DMs about my suspension setup, and if I think the H.A.S kit is worth it. Do I like it? Do I think it's worth it? Do I think it's a good setup for track, for street? Is it comfortable? Will it wear my shocks? All of the questions that I get via DMs. And then from there, hopefully you guys will be able to decide whether the H.A.S kit is right for you. We've got our coffee. We're ready to go. We've also got a little notification in the corner of the instrument cluster that is telling me I need to check the air in one of my tires. I don't know. We'll figure that out later. Real quick, a couple of announcements for you guys. I have t-shirts and like face masks and phone cases and stuff like that. Check it out on my website, as well as all my blogs and basically all the videos and all the reviews and installs I do. I do written format of those because some people just resonate better with written content than video content. I just got in from Starbucks. I don't know why I'm still wearing it. But if you guys do want to pick up any of this stuff, support the channel, check out the website. All my modifications to every single build I've ever done is on my website, www.thickf30.com. Also, I quick want to give a shout out to Jake Spence. You guys might know Jake Spence. He's a fellow YouTuber, fellow BMW enthusiast. He has a insanely fast 1 series, super sick build. I nabbed a couple of pretty sick t-shirts from his website. I'll have it linked down below for you guys if you want to check it out and support Jake Spence. Anyways, back to the video, H.A.S kit, what do I think about it? Let's go for a drive and then we'll stop, do a little bit of talking, show you the car, talk about where it sits, talk about how low it is, what I think about the suspension, all of that good stuff. Oh, baby, I love your way every day. I just want to talk about the fact that I love this setup. The KW height adjustable spring kit is absolutely killer. It's like you're getting the technology of KW coilovers and springs at a fraction of the price. KW, without question, is one of the better suspension companies out there when it comes to coilovers and their springs. Pretty much everything they make suspension-wise is really, really good. And you can, you can read all day in the forums, you can go to any review sites for KW. People love KW. It's up there with Öhlins, some of the better suspension companies. Now, are their coilovers expensive? Yeah, they're absolutely expensive. But that's also why I knew that the height adjustable spring kit would probably be a quality setup when it came to just the springs. I personally wanted to get into a suspension setup that was A, affordable, B, quality, and C, gave me a little bit of adjustability. I have ran coilovers before from different companies that are in like the $1,000 range. I just had a really bad experience with them. I didn't think that they were quality. I thought they rode really terrible, and they made a lot of noise. For $1,000, I don't think that you should be buying a coilover setup. I think for $1,000, you should be looking at something like the H.A.S kit. The H.A.S kit's like right around $900, $870, something like that. And I think if you're going to be doing coilovers, you should not be spending less than like $2,000. That's just my opinion on it, or even like $2,500. A good coilover setup is miles apart from basically like a cheap coilover setup, which there's a lot of companies out there. I'm not gonna name any names, I'm not gonna drop any company names, but you guys know there's a lot of companies out there that make very cheap coilover setups. I've watched enough content and videos on people who have made reviews on cheaper coilover setups, and it's funny because like across the board, everyone's like, yeah, they're great, they're fine. If you've ever ridden in a car that has a very good quality suspension setup versus a very poor suspension setup, there are massive differences. And all it really took for me personally was to experience both. So on my E90 M3, I ran a $1,000 coilover setup from a company that's pretty well known. And it was awful. I'm not gonna lie to you guys, like straight up, it was probably one of the worst suspension setups that I've ever felt in a car. And this is a company that people say is really good, and that I've read reviews on. They're like, yeah, it's awesome. I'm just here to tell you guys that, you know, I'm unbiased. I'm not working with any companies that make suspension. I don't have a suspension sponsor or anything, but I have ran springs, I have ran cheap coilovers, and I have been in cars and have friends that run very expensive coilovers. So I've kind of experienced the full spectrum. And that's kind of why I feel like I'm qualified to give an honest review to you guys. So in my opinion, if you're going to be buying coilovers, you should be spending $2,000 and up. That's just my opinion. I think that you're gonna get a better setup. You're gonna get a more quality spring. You're gonna get parts that are just manufactured and fabricated at a much higher level of quality. And I think in the long term, you're gonna be happier. Now, all of this is relative, you guys. All of this is relative to what you are looking to do with your car. Let's say you have, you know, let's talk about my 328, all right? So my 328 was a cheaper BMW that was never going to see a track. It was just a simple little modified BMW that I enjoyed driving and throwing parts on. I would never put a $2,500 coilover system on that car. It's just not worth it. It didn't make sense to do that. I had H.A.S Super Sport springs. They were fantastic for that car. They were the right price point. I wasn't gonna spend any more money. I spent $300, I think, on the springs, and then like install was like 500 bucks or something like that. Then you got to get an alignment too. So all of those things come into factor. But the point is, it all depends on what you're looking to do with your car. Now, with my M2 that I have now, I am going to be tracking this car. So I drive this car on the street, and I am going to track this car. With the suspension setup I have right now, I think it's really good. I think the H.A.S kit is fantastic for the amount of money that you're paying. If you're not going to go for a full coilover, like expensive coilover setup, I think the H.A.S kit is like the next step there, because you're getting the technology of KW, but you're getting the price point of like something a little bit slightly higher than a spring setup. Now you're also getting that adjustability of the KW coils, but you're actually using your OEM shocks. So that's the point of the H.A.S kit. It's basically an adjustable spring on a sleeve that goes over your stock shocks. So the other thing to note with that kind of setup is that, yes, inevitably at some point, your shocks will go bad. I mean, your shocks were not designed to be adjusted that low on a car, and inevitably over time you will feel them wear. The ride will become a little bit more harsh. Your overall driving experience will be a little bit more firm. So some people will say it's worth it, some people will say it's not. For me personally, I think that inevitably at some point I will do a much nicer coilover setup like Öhlins or KW, because I am going to be tracking this car and kind of taking that a little more seriously in the upcoming future. This is a 6-month review on my H.A.S kit, and dude, it's good. Like, it's good for the price. It's the best out there, in my opinion. It rides really, really good. Just the other day, I drove in a car that had a cheaper coilover setup, an M2 that had a cheaper coilover setup, like $1,000 range. It was horrible, man. Like, the ride quality was absolutely terrible. And then we went for a ride in my car, and the proof was in the pudding. Like, my car drove, just rode a lot better than the other car on the cheaper coilover setup. Shocks, good shocks are expensive. So if you're not replacing that coil setup with a really good shock system, I just don't think it's worth it, you know? And you're better off just using the stock shock setup with an adjustable spring. Now, can you do a traditional spring setup on shocks? Yeah, of course. But the thing with that setup is you're very limited. There aren't many good spring setups that go kind of as low as I wanted to go. I knew I wanted to go a little bit lower than, you know, H&R or Eibach or Swift or any of these other companies. I wanted to go just a little bit lower, and that's kind of where H.A.S kit comes into play. It allows you to go a little bit lower than a spring setup and not pay for like a super expensive coilover setup. So that's really the benefit of having the KW height adjustable spring kit. Yeah, man. This car's planted. It definitely feels like it's on rails. This suspension setup with this car is just a phenomenal option. Now, where does the H.A.S kit sort of lack? You don't have the full adjustability, right? So you don't have like adjustable camber plates. You don't have adjustable dampening. You're kind of stuck with however that OEM shock feels and the KW spring height adjustable spring setup is. So, which is actually really good, I'm not gonna lie. Like, I've had this on for 6 months. I would say it's a little bit more firm over those 6 months, which is honestly inevitable because these shocks are gonna get more firm as time goes on, because they're really not meant to be slammed or lowered like this. They're OEM, so they're meant for OEM springs. But 6 months in, the car feels great. I have absolutely no qualms. For some people, it might be a little too harsh. For me, I kind of like a little bit more of like a firm, harsher ride. So it really suits me in the way that I prefer this car to drive. This car just feels fantastic in the corners. I mean, I haven't taken it to the track with the H.A.S kit, but I'm sure it's gonna perform really well. We are gonna be taking it soon. The track is getting repaved, and it opens next month. So soon, guys, soon. I have the track wheels ordered, everything's coming in. It's gonna be fun. I'm gonna lead you guys through that whole process. There's zero body roll. Zero body roll with the H.A.S kit. I think it looks really good. As low as it is, I think it's like a really, really good height for this car. Likes to get a little sideways on a Sunday, right? So overall, when it comes to the driving and just the way that this car feels with the H.A.S kit, it feels really, really good. I am super happy with the way that this whole kit has performed over the past 6 months. I was blown away when we first installed it into the car. I was actually blown away by how well the car handled and how good the suspension setup felt. I do think that somewhere down the line, I will be upgrading to like an Öhlins or like a full KW V2 kit or something of that nature. Something that's just like the next graduated level up, because I am going to be getting a little more serious into the track content, and I do want to be able to adjust things like dampening. So, our springs for you. Should you go with an H&R Super Sport spring? In my opinion, if you're not worried about having the car pretty low, then yeah, springs are the way to go, man. I mean, they're like 250 bucks, $300 bucks, something like that. I've ran springs on almost every single car that I've owned. I've had aftermarket springs, and they've never failed me. They've been great. For this one in particular, I just knew that you know, springs will get you to where you want to be, but they just never really quite sat low enough for me. They were a decent height, but I always just wanted like a little bit more. And I feel like the H.A.S kit kind of allowed me to get that little bit more. And the great part about it is, look, if I don't like it, or it's just too low for daily driving, I can always adjust it. The H.A.S kit is fully adjustable. Just like a traditional coilover setup. I personally think that this setup is, I mean, it's a no-brainer. Like if you're not trying to spend a ton of money and you just want to get something that's a little bit lower than, you know, your traditional spring setup, the H.A.S kit's the way to go. You can also do the M Performance kit. I don't know what cars that's available for. I know Tommy L Garage runs it, and his car has like a really good ride height. But when it comes to this H.A.S kit, you guys, man, it's killer. It really is the way to go for a suspension setup, and I just think it's the best bang for your buck, to be honest with you. I'm always amazed at how fast it gets. Just so warm in North Carolina. It's like 9 a.m. and it's so hot. So just to show you guys kind of what we're looking at in terms of the height of the kit. Right now, I'm all the way down. So I'm all the way low on the height adjustable spring kit. The front is tucking, so it's, you can't fit a finger in there. So it's like, honestly, the perfect height. Like in my opinion, it's like the perfect height. Right now, I'm running 10mm spacers all the way around on this car, and I had 12mm on the front, but I was rubbing. I started rubbing with the 12s. I do have to roll these fenders. There is a little bit of a lip in here that I'm just gonna have to go ahead and roll those, because inevitably on the track, when you're really diving into the corners, I will get a little bit of rub. So we're at 10mm all the way around, which seems to be a really good setup for the OEM wheels with this suspension. And I did find that someone else on Beamer Post was running that setup. Seems to be the best way to go. Here's the back So the back is pretty much the same as the front. It tucks just a touch. You can't fit a finger in there. So it's definitely settled over the 6 months. I had a little bit of a gap, like a finger gap, when I first installed these, and now there is 0 gap. So it's perfect. And what I like about it is there's 0 rake, so the car sits completely even. And if this is too low for you guys, I mean, that's the great thing about this H.A.S kit. You can adjust it. It's adjustable. Just like a traditional coilover setup, you can lift it up. You know, I mean, this car's pretty low, man. Like about 5 fingers. It's like 2 inches or so, 2.5 inches, something like that. So the car sits relatively low. This is probably lower than most people would like for daily driving, but you know, I work for myself, I work from home. Daily driving for me is like the grocery store and running errands around town. And honestly, we have really nice roads here in Charlotte, North Carolina. As long as you're not in Uptown. Uptown has terrible roads, but where I live, I'm on the south side of Charlotte, and the roads are great here, so I really don't have to worry too much. I do scrape every now and then on speed bumps and whatnot, but you know, that's just part of it. I knew exactly what I was getting into when I lowered my car. I've done this enough times. Throwing carbon on a car and lowering it, inevitably, you know, you are going to scrape some things sometimes, and that's just part of the game. You will get people every now and then that just complain about having a low car or complain about carbon hitting the ground all the time. Honestly, like I said before, you know, if you're worried about that, then you just shouldn't lower your car. Like, it's just not for you. This is something that you have to kind of adopt and just know that it is gonna happen. You are going to crack lips. You are gonna scrape. Those are just things that are inevitably going to happen if you are lowering your cars or putting these kind of modifications on it. So basically, to just wrap this one up and just to be like super honest and clear with you guys, the KW H.A.S kit is absolutely fantastic for the price. In my opinion, it is the best bang for the buck when it comes to a suspension setup for your car. Now, I will say the KW H.A.S kit is not available for all BMW models. I couldn't even tell you what they are available for, but I do know for a fact that they're available for the M2, I believe the M3 and the M4. I actually think that the F80 series, all of the F80s, use the same KW H.A.S kit. If you guys are interested in this actual kit, I'll have it linked down below. It's super affordable. The install is relatively easy. It's just like a traditional spring install. You will have to go ahead and get an alignment. Now, some people talk about, you know, should you get the car aligned immediately when you install the springs, or should you wait until it settles? I always do it immediately because I'm right there at the shop, and the shop has an alignment rack, so it makes sense to just do it. I've personally never had an issue with my car settling and then being out of alignment, but if that were the case, you could obviously just go right back to the shop and get another alignment. So all in all, what it comes down to, you guys, is what are you looking to get out of your car? Do you want it really low? Do you want it to handle well? Do you want cheap? If you are like an F30 guy, like me personally, I thought the Super Sports were fantastic for that car. I didn't need anything more than that. The car handled really well, and the springs were relatively cheap. They were like 300 bucks, easy install. And for the stock shocks, they held up really well over time. I will say that, you know, regardless of whatever suspension setup you do, if you are not replacing these stock shocks with something that is designed to be lowered, inevitably, at some point, your stock shocks will go out. Anyways, guys, if you are interested in the KW H.A.S kit, I'm gonna have it linked down below. Also, like I said before, make sure you guys check out the website. I have all of the modifications that I've ever done on any car, a bunch of blogs, Beamer Code stuff, merchandise, everything you need. thickf30.com, www.thickf30.com. I appreciate you guys so much. Thank you so much for watching. Please do subscribe, comment down below, like this video, hit that bell notification, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.